So as you can see, I've set up three frames, video frames of what I would have used for inspiration for this assignment. So I love the fight scene in Mask of Zorro, and I'm just going to skip through some of it with you guys. Up until now, we've studied a lot about gesture. We've studied about the best frame to use and the key frames, the gesture that is explosive, that describes the movement, combining the character's expression with their gesture, and their gesture with their body type, and their body type with their clothing of choice, and everything has to have a synergy to it, reflecting the same story over and over again, telling the same story but in different levels of design. When you add that next level of design, which is occupation, so it's more than just gesture, expression, and costume. That's for standing character design, but moving illustration character design on top of gesture, expression, and costume, you have occupation. You have body type. You have body type and occupation are very similar to each other. We're adding more layers that we have to draft early on in concept. So the body type, which is the athletic body type, reflects the athletic occupation, which is in this case an acrobatic type of sword dancer. So what I didn't say is I didn't say it was a dancer holding a sword. A lot of you have designed it like this, and I'm sure a lot of you are going like, oh. It was a dancer-esque kind of spirit, the spirit of a dancer and a swordsman, so I called it a sword dancer. And the swordsman comes first because it's about what it is that you do with a sword. And it's combat, it's some kind of military background maybe. At least I would have taken it in that direction. Very strong character, probably a very athletic, acrobatic kind of character. So these scenes here, the way they chase him into a table at the end. So he jumps from the top, and this is kind of like towards the end, or actually when they first discover him, right on top of the table. Do you see those really dancer-esque kind of twirls that he does? His pose is so much less aggressive than the angry guy who has the temper, who is the antagonist. He's got a lot of grace to him. His shoulders are straight. He actually looks like an acrobat. I mean, you can see him straight do acrobatic moves like that, and I'm just trying to see if I can find the scene. Okay, so a lot of his keyframes, a lot of the moments where it's just like the money shot, it's always so graceful. Look at this. So this could have been an excellent pose to use. He's low to the ground, he's got bent knees, both arms are bent, his back is straight, his spine is ready for, or has just reeled from a really, really intense movement, a physically stressful movement. And I can either speed it up or slow it down. Okay, but he's got a very, very confident, athletic flexibility to him that you can see compared to the kind of clumsy way everyone else is fighting. And that's typically the kind of attitude I would have invested into a sword dancer. So he's good at dancing, he's a swordsman, and when he fights with his sword, a bit of that dancer comes through. Okay, so do you guys have any questions at all about the biggest challenges you had with designing this sword dancer? Time and again, I always go back to the main lesson, which is plan, research, look into what it is that you're drawing, get more out of what it is that you're drawing by seeing it in action. Don't just study still gestures, study complete gestures in their motion. A gesture isn't a gesture unless you've observed it as a moving animation. Without the movement, you don't really understand where the gesture is going and where it's coming from. And in that, you don't really think about the muscles required, the muscles that just relaxed or rested, the muscles that are anticipating or bracing for a large movement, whether or not the spine is forward or backward. Usually people think gesture is just in what you're doing with your arms and legs. They forget about the torso. So a lot of you drew this character, forgot about the pride in the spine. A lot of dancers, which is the other video that I found for you guys, a lot of dancers keep their spines very, very proud. So this song, it's got a wonderful video to it. And it's just kind of like expressive dance or interpretive dance. It moves with the lyrics. So you'll see a lot of like romantic back and forth, male-female archetype relationships. But you see almost every single time they try to keep their back straight, proud, because that's posture. And so another thing that a lot of you are missing, and some of you did actually have it, is posture, the posture of a dancer. And then finally this video here, which I love, love, love as well. I love how he just explosively, so you can see that, and then the spine is like almost always very proud and straight. So he's a dancer. Yes, he studied martial arts. I'm sure he knows, you know, has a very very strong background with martial arts, and is a dancer for movies as an extra in Bollywood movies and stuff. And then you have Jackie Chan, who's a wushu master. Okay, so this is his flashback. And then look at that. Did you guys see that? The pride, the strong back, the legs apart. And I want you guys to remember, but I don't know, a lot of you have seen it, but the scene from Game of Thrones, which I probably should have brought up as well. Game of Thrones training. What's her name? Arya. There we go. Alright, so it's mostly in the footwork as well that I want to express. And he talks about how in Davos, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I'm so sorry if I'm mistaken, I think it's called Davos. No, Davos is the name of a guy. I forget the area, but where he comes from, dancing and swordsmanship is one thing. Being a swordsman is a fight. And at the same time, it's a dance. So you're struggling to keep your inner circle, and in Mask of Zorro, his trainer, Zorro's trainer, who was played by Anthony Hopkins, tells him about the outer circle and inner circle and how to stay safe during a fight. But the footwork really is how you exit and enter your inner circle. So the footwork is something a lot of you missed out on. And it's not just about a ballet scene plus sword. See these, every single motion, every single scene. Let me slow it down. Speed 0.25. Every single major keyframe is such a dance move, and it's even called choreography. We can call it choreography, which is like the frame by frame assessment of the poses for a dance as well as a sword dance. Okay, so that's something that I want you guys to think about. So today it was about sword dancing or sword dancers, but tomorrow it'll be about a character who has a spear, or the next day it'll be about a character who has a fan. How are you going to incorporate that character as strong and as well as graceful, and the grace that they need in order to execute these complex poses and complex choreography? Okay, so the scene is really good as well. Okay, excellent, beautiful keyframe here. Just a wonderful keyframe. The perspective, the kind of anguish, the stacking of the head behind the armor, and just how he always manages to keep his back straight. That's something very difficult, because I have a background in dance, and one of the biggest problems is keeping back straight while you're dancing, as well as the smile. But it's more important to keep your posture confident and clean, a clean silhouette. And a lot of the silhouette, especially if you were doing a female dancer, the silhouette is in the shoulders and in the neckline. So you can't have characters haunching all the time like she is, and that's why she looks like the clumsier novice of the two. So I'm going to be looking for something similar to all this, all together, kind of moving together. And a lot of you guys don't have these core units. Okay. So a sword dancer, again, is talking about a dance pose. There has to be some kind of pose involved, or some kind of grace to the dance. So what we're seeing here is more of a an angle where he's leaping in front, he feels more like a swordsman than a dancer. So a dancer, how do we incorporate or reintroduce the dancing element to his silhouette is maybe if I do something like that with the hand holding the sword on the other side instead of at the top. So that would have kind of talked a bit more about gesture or dance or expressive dance. So he's a swordsman with a lot of expression, a lot of artistic, like he's an artist, not just a swordsman, he's an artist with the sword. So that would mean it's got a bit more of a pose going on. The legs here seem just a little bit clumsy. It's still, even after my edit, feels like he's just in the middle of a lunge or a pose. So what we would do to make him feel a little bit more, remember that stacking we just saw? To make him feel a little bit more aggressive is maybe stack the face behind the scarf just to show the perspective and complete it. And finally, maybe add some kind of posing element to the dance. So pointing the toes is a really, really big giveaway for a dancer. Really big giveaway. So that could have been something. Maybe he's wearing dancing shoes, shoes that are a little less bulky. The boot feels like a very bulky boot. So I would give him something that kind of lets him jump around, like his feet are unobstructed. They still have their grip. And maybe the pointed toe will really help. Okay. So the angle is not the best angle. A lot to do with dancing. If you guys have ever seen like armored kind of dance for different cultures, or even Native American dance that warriors do, it's very aggressive but still very posy, very stiff in that they keep not stiff, but the word I'm looking for is lost on me, but the way that they manage to keep the pose involved in the grace and the image and the picture they're drawing with their bodies while they still stay warriors. They still stay big and strong. And when it comes to a dancer, they're always really, really wildly dressed. They're dressed in a way to either scare their opponent. There's also the haka dance. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with that. But it's also a dance plus warrior. So you're keeping the pose, the neck is really straight up, the back is straight arched forward, proud chest, very, very proud chest, and scary faces. So if you were going for a sword dancer that was like a haka dance plus sword, then you probably should have looked at something where the faces are scary. I hope I am, yes, there it is. I hope I'm looking at the right. Okay, so there's the dance. You guys see that? But you can just add a sword. So I would have added, you know, one of these guys with a massive kind of saber. So this is a very, very popular tribal dance of the Maori people in New Zealand, I believe. And it's a dance to scare their enemies off. It's a very, very scary culture, or the history of the tribe, cannibalism and all that, but you can see how they have their proud backs and their very, very dancey feet. All these guys got great footwork. These guys may look big, but they're very light on their feet. Very upper body directed. So it didn't always have to be a graceful ballet acrobat. It could have been a heavyweight tank like this. What if you wanted to do a sword dancer that was more of a heavyweight? Find the realistic equivalent and attach the sword to it and find a way to make the swordsmanship reflected through the dance. So if you were looking for a heavyweight guy, but a heavyweight guy at the same time wouldn't be jumping in the air. He'd kind of stay on his feet a lot and use his brute strength to get him through situations instead of jumping over his enemy. It's probably a guy that does not like jumping at all. As for the book cover component of the assignment, so I wanted you guys to frame your images around a book cover. And I wanted to talk a little bit about font. A lot of you will probably never have to deal with font if you worked in book cover. They probably outsourced that to some other font specialists. But I like to, when I did book covers, I like doing everything. So when you're talking about a character that has taken over the entire book cover, who is a scary character, you don't follow up with a Casablanca font. It's just, that's not how it works. This is a very feminine font. There's feminine fonts and masculine fonts. And when you're drawing a very strong masculine energy filled illustration, you don't use a Casablanca romantic film noir font. This would have probably been a much better font type for the main title. I liked how symmetrical everything was, but it felt a little bit boring. So maybe the author's name here and the heavier, stronger font to reflect the character over there on the left. Let's look at another piece. This piece is wonderful in that, yes, it is a lightweight acrobat character. However, a lot of the lighting that you have is a little bit off. So I'm going to talk a little bit about lighting. I want to talk about the theme and at the same time provide you with just more of form-related critiques. So what I'm doing here is showing you that all the areas that the light has drowned in, including him, have to be much brighter so we don't actually get shadows. Okay. And you may have stopped the highlight on him because past this line he's above this line. That's not how it works. This line down doesn't mean this line down is all highlighted. Anything above this line is still inside the ray of light coming through the window. So all of these really kind of bourgeoisie people watching him in the distance, yeah, okay, they can be a little bit more drowned in the light. And this light also feels very blue, but you don't have the same blue light coming out of the distance. So I'm going to really quickly adjust that and make the light the same temperature. Light source can't be changed in temperature halfway across a painting. Write that back. You can't just change the way the light source works. It has to be blue all around if that's where it's coming from. I think the texture on the ground is a little bit strong, but we can always fix that. So what I'm going to do is duplicate the layer and grab Dodge tool and just completely drown him in that light. Because he is under that light. A little subsurface under his cape. Some light on the other side. Some subsurface under his ear. And I'm going to erase away all the negative space. So don't worry too much. This is typically how he should have been illuminated. And because the sword is moving up towards the name of the character, the writer here, or the title, it'll work together. And then what I do after that is just erase into the background anything the light hasn't drowned in. Even the glare, I'll bring in the glare on a separate layer. Okay, so if you kind of were confused, I hope now you have your answer. Yes, he is supposed to be completely drowned in light. He is under that same massive light, whatever's causing it, maybe sunrise, sunset, but something is causing him to illuminate and everything under that ray of light. And the light just has to be respected. The light is part of your story, but it doesn't change or prioritize. If anything, he's the focal point. He should have been whiter than these characters here. All right. Then there's the amount of shadow you're using. So for an object to exist in this big belt of light, a lot of that light would have bounced right back, diffusing his shadows. So I would borrow from this blue on the white and just use that everywhere here to diffuse some of the shadows. So now we have bounce light and primary light on him, and he's been refocused as the centerpiece. Beautiful job. I know you had a very stiff previous final, and after my critique you kind of added some really nice flexibility in his dance steps. Really like it. This definitely feels like a sword dancer. Some of your perspective is a little bit off, so the body should not be beside the arm that's supposed to be behind the body. So this arm feels like it's doing something completely different. It's kind of just dislocated and dancing on its own. Okay, some of this bounce light will bounce on his arm. Alright, and then another thing I'm going to do is that I'm just going to darken this far side, because you can't just have all this light in the background challenging what's happening everywhere else. So I'm going to bring in a nice universal shadow color, and it's just going to be one of these blues, and I'm just going to use that for the background. Really, nothing else should be illuminated. Everything else should be nice and dark and crisp, allowing him to feel like he is drowning. Even if you have little pieces of light in the background, they should be a little bit more muted. Yes, we can keep them there to create a sense of depth. See how there's now a background? But it's not a background that's completely gotten in the way. As for your colors, they're not uniform. I would throw a blue wash over everything here. And we'll look at the before and after, and I'll correct the arm as well. Just throw in that blue haze. The light source, even though it's not connecting to the background, it's still affecting the color wash. It's a cool picture and should be treated as a cool picture. There's no like blue light and red shadows. No, you can't have warm shadows. Okay, so now things feel a little bit more tempered, and I'm just bringing up some of these excessive shadows in the area of light. And I'm going to concentrate the shadows here because it's still part of the shadowed area. There we go. And that glare is, I don't really miss it. I don't miss the glare at all. And I'm just going to clean up your foreground shadows, which should be a little bit more pronounced. Alright, so it's a complete silhouette. I love the picture. I love what it is that you've kind of described with this story. And anywhere where the background is against the character is now lighter than the background. If the character is drowning in light, the background has no business being brighter than the character. Okay, so any questions from the artist? Yeah, you can't change the light color, exactly. So we'll go back to a really basic light scene. I'm going to be assigning you guys an indoor architectural scene. Something indoor, no characters or nothing. Just perspective and blocks and lights and all the fun stuff. So no more character design, but we will come back to character design as soon as possible. After that, and you have a lot of these areas that should be just completely white. His pantaloons seem to be very bright. Alright, so the cylinder, the basic cylinder is missing, and I think it is a good idea for this month for the video, because I don't have any personal work completed this month. I was very, very busy, but I think it will be very, very welcomed if I did a basics on forms how-to kind of tutorial. A lot of you are forgetting about the cylinder, which, yes, is arguably the king of all shapes. I mean, the cube is, really. The cube is king. But the cylinder is so prominent in all organic patterns. You guys really need to start thinking about the cylinder a little bit better. Alright, so the cylinder's accent value change is radial. Its whole deal is that it's got gradients everywhere. So his pants didn't feel like they were rotated around a solid cylindrical thigh. And yes, that's exactly the same thing we're talking about here, how cylinders in this case are not really given enough time. The fabric could billow a little bit better. So spend more time on your cylinders and your geometry. Spend more time planning the scene. Be careful not to blend background with foreground. It's very, very problematic to do that. And then we have the possibility that the shadow of the cape might be inside the door, but the door seems far away enough. I'm trying to find the perfect subsurface scattering value here. Shouldn't be that bright because he's already drowning in light a bit. And then we've got the framing towards the top and the framing towards the bottom. Now I'm going to try to bring in that glare, but a very controlled glare. I'm not going to just kind of throw values everywhere. So the start over here can be a bit brighter. There can be a bit more glare towards anything white. This character seems to have just kind of exited the cast shadow, so I'm going to get rid of their glare. Shouldn't be that strong. But her arm seems to be very dark and sun-kissed, like it's in a dark scene or in some shade. Her arm is not in the shade. Her arm is exposed to the light. So because skin is very reflective, it'll get some of that light back. And this pure white of the glare moves all the way down over the marble of the floor and through. And that's why there's a problem right now with the excessive detail on the floor. It's really taking away from the character. As for the title needs to be much bigger. It's kind of tucked away towards the top. Something down here is a lot more involved. And if the whole scene is like a very glowy scene, what I would do is unlock the layer if Photoshop will let me. Get the general wash color and put that beneath and try to just lower the opacity of the entire scene. What this will do is unify all the values, and I can just raise this in certain areas actually where I want more glare coming through, so he can go back to being primary. Okay, so it's nice and out of the way, a little bit more pastel instead of so extreme. I feel like the extra little bit of opacity is doing a lot for the painting. And you have that completed blue wash over everything, so it's a nice complete temperature. And then anywhere where we lost a little bit of white, you can go back and get it just along here. For the rim of the cast shadow, we need to saturate. So any rim of cast shadow has a little belt of saturation on it. That's because colors come out in the midtones, and right on the edge of a cast shadow are some midtones. So we're just kind of illuminating here on the edge. Okay, so the title is kind of in the way at the moment from seeing the proper before and after. And I'm just going to bring down saturation just a touch, just so it's not excessive. So a lot of light changes for the scene. So you see how before it didn't make much sense that he's not in the light, unless the door was like a cat door and it didn't reach the top of his body, or he was under some kind of curtain canopy. But what's the color of the curtain? That's not seen on him. Here things are a little bit more controlled and uniform. The cylinders on his thighs really needed some work. Let's move on. Excellent gesture, by the way, but yes, the arm needed to be somewhere back there. Okay, so do you see how dislocated it was? Needed to be behind his body and not beside his torso. Alright, if you want this piece, let me know so that you can adjust your colors. These are all meant to be portfolio pieces. So if you want your corrections back, do let me know and I'll attach them to the corrections only text channel. So this character here, I'm going to look at, where are you? Okay, is supposed to be a character that is dancing forever. Like he can't stop dancing. He's stuck in this cursed dance. What I would do is use a little bit more of an expressive dance, expressive pose, like trapped or something like that while holding his two swords. So expressive dance, trap images. Let's see if we can find something a little bit. Okay, this is perfect. Do you see this character right here? It looks like they're kind of trapped under something, or their arms are shackled. So instead of him jumping in the air like he's attacking something, he just feels like he can't stop jumping, like he has a jumping curse on him, and he has like moon level anti-gravity and he just can't stop jumping. It doesn't feel like he's trapped in this horrible curse where he can only dance forever. And people, you know, he's like a specter when he passes travelers who hardly see him. He stays distant from people. If you were trapped into a dance for the rest of your life, you kind of, it's like a magical state of existence, right? You're not just actually eating and pooping and sleeping in the dance form. No, it's like a sort of supernatural elevation of your body. Like you died a long time ago and your spirit is trapped in this constant dance for the entertainment of some evil god or something like that. So I wouldn't see it as someone who's living in their trap. I see it as someone who has died a long time ago, because I'm sure their body fatigued and died and rotted away, and all that was left was like a glowing specter that constantly danced. I think that's a lot more poetic, and I really think that if you had thought or written a little bit more, and this is all just the narrative and the writing, If you had written a little bit more, I think you would have gotten to that conclusion as well, and you would have chosen better dancing gestures. Right now what I'm looking at is a very stale gesture. Seems like he's training or sparring with a friend. He's sparring with a friend and he saw his girlfriend looking at him from the balcony, and he kind of got trapped and staring at her, and his friend kicked him in the nuts. But here it feels like, yes, they're very trapped. You don't have to make her sitting. It can be one leg on top of the other and the other one bent this way on the tippy toes, and then you have the swords kind of on the sides there on sheathed, and that would be the expressive dance. I think the background is beautiful for that, so let's give it a shot so you can actually see it. I'm really all for being able to kind of see it in action. So I think this feels a lot more poetic, a lot more expressive. And I hope this gives you a better idea of what's expected, not just out of me and my classes, but potential employers. Like if you guys, I've been really crazy about Magic the Gathering, so if we were hired for a Magic the Gathering card of a character that is trapped in Eternal Dance, like the card would be called Eternal Dance, and the character can't fight or defend for the remainder of the game, and it's like a permanent artifact or something like that, then this would be an amazing scene to depict that kind of trap in battle. I'm just doing this really roughly. Oh my god, that was horrible. Alright. Damn it. I'll try it again. Okay, so I'm just thinking about telling the story through the interpretive dance. But keeping the aesthetic intact. So that feels a lot more poetic, and I'll show you what I see in my mind by completing this. So I'm just completely getting rid of him. I'm so sorry. But when an art director goes in there and paints over everything you drew, it means that, you know, something went wrong with your drafting. Something went wrong with your initial design. I'm sure you drew those swords just fine. His face is just fine. No one is saying that there's no merit in all the choices that you made beforehand, but that's why you're in a learning environment right now. So you made this mistake today. You're not going to make it later when you're actually being hired to design a sword dancer. So what I'm doing here is just adjusting some of this. I'm going to adjust the wash real quick to the environment color. I'm going to darken the character, and then move them somewhere into the foreground. Lighten the space behind them just a little bit, just to stage them properly. I'll use midtones. Okay, and maybe there might be a little ledge or a rock. I know you've got the two rocks here, but there might be a better way to present them. And I'm just going to use burn tool on shadows here on the character. Oh, it's locked. I'm going to create that little area of relief to complete the gesture. And maybe add a second leg here. I'll use my sketch brush. Normal. Maybe that's the trap. Maybe they're just in there. Even when they're resting, they're in like this dance position. Okay, so that's kind of the way I would have conceptualized it. As for the font is very girly. Feels like a Huckleberry Finn cover font. It feels like something Western or something a little bit more coming of age story. Some kind of Harlequin novel book cover. I want something a little bit more dreary, something that is hopeless, like a hopeless font. And hopeless fonts are fonts without any description to them. So it would be a font that is very basic, not even as Times New Roman would be excited compared to the font I'm thinking about. It'd be really cool if the character was on some kind of rock as well, like some kind of really rocky, unforgiving kind of environment. Instead of creating that path, he was just jumping along, just moon jumps all the way through. Okay, and then we're getting rid of this. And the yellow is great. I like the yellow. It's a good idea, but I really think that that font had no place in a story about a character cursed in this horrible immortality for the entertainment of some evil god. I think way too happy-go-lucky. Kind of funny. And if it was a funny story, I guess, yeah, that would make a lot of sense. But I'm thinking a very bold font. Oops. Just down here somewhere. So remember, the font is a reflection of the story. The font shouldn't be just completely changing the story. So, title. Oh, Tears of Gallet, I believe. Let me try something like 200. Okay, that's a bit strong. I would go for a font that's a little bit more, even more basic than this. Bold can be very basic and beautiful. Alright, so right down there, really nice. Do you see how complete the image is now from a distance? So the foot is a little bit off that I drew. But do you see how happy-go-lucky that is? Oh, the Tears of Galgalad. Oh, or Belgalad, there we go. The Tears of Belgalad. And then Tears of Galgalad or whatever, you know what I'm saying. Okay, so no Mickey Mouse fonts. I'm so sorry about that impression I just did. It probably just blew your ears out. Okay. You control enchanted creature. Enchanted creature attacks each turn if able. Eternal dance. Yeah, there you go. I love the way you created the depth and the distance. I love this rock. I would probably just have a little fun with that rock and just kind of illuminate some of the pieces here and then burn on shadows to bring those down. Bring in a little bit of contrast there on the rock. Don't want it to take too much tension away from the character though, so I do this a bit more carefully, not with a sweeping large dodge tool, but I'd go into every little rune and illuminate it. Okay. Oops. So again, if you want these pieces, just let me know. I'll send them back to you, including the corrections. So this is all beautiful. All of this is gorgeous, but the font looks like a Dove soap font. It seems like this should be on a soap bar or a chocolate bar. Sway. So I know you're trying to show the swaying in the title, but if an author came to you in the story about a samurai, half Arabian, half samurai master of the sword, dancing his way to revenge, the title shouldn't be called Sway in the Wind. It would be Dance to Revenge. That would be the name of the title. The Dance to Revenge. So I wouldn't use this kind of soap bar, chocolate bar, Dove. It just seems like I'm looking at something like that, like Dove. Something very feminine, extremely feminine font, very masculine character. I love the gesture, by the way. You chose the best one. I remember you sharing a lot of your thumbnails. Beautiful job. But this font is absolutely 100% wrong. There's really, I mean, I like the way the word sway is a bit bigger than the rest. But it's doing nothing but interrupting the beauty of your piece. I know you wanted to tangle it all up, and it was a great idea, but if it was like a female character actually swaying in the wind, like what's that movie about the character that dances and sings, and it's not The Hills Have Eyes, it's Dancing in the Hills, or I'm not sure. This is perfect. It's a little modern. It feels like very a sci-fi type of font because it's very still and clean and apple kind of crisp white. We want something that's a little bit more aggressive. At times New Roman would have been just fine, and the Path to Revenge or the Dance to Revenge would have been a lot better. The background is a bit too bright. I think your rules of depth are just a little bit off. So remember how the light environment of the previous piece we looked at was nice and dark. You weren't really doing that here. So you need a nice and dark base to explain what's happening, and then just darken the background a bit. He doesn't have to be in a completely lit room. And then what you can do is go back to the before and just Throw that little bit of light on him if you need it. Okay, nothing's wrong with that. Could be at an angle. His swords could be crazy reflective, but the background being so bright really threw away a lot of the read. It's just way too white. Is he in an open field? So why are there trees looking like they're building like this canopy or blocking away the light? And if he's supposed to have a little bit of light on him to show that he's the chosen one or something like that, why isn't the light kind of just selectively choosing him the way it would have if he was the chosen one? Do you understand? Okay, so some selective light, perfect, and then title here, title box here, and title box here, or title box in the perfect center, because nothing else is symmetrical. Would have been really, really nice. Okay. And you can always prepare where your title is going to be with a simple little placeholder like a box, so that you know not to occupy too much detail in certain areas. It's really good to try to overlap as much as you can, or plan as much as you can early on in your drafting. It's going to be one big thing marrying together, so it's good to plan. A Dance of Daggers by Ray D. L. Shading. The worst book this year. Do some form studies ASAP. Istebrak. Just submit anything. Apprentice Discord. This is great. It really feels like high energy. I wanted to see some dancer in it though, so he's kind of fallen on his side. He doesn't feel like he's in control unless he's defied some gravity, so a little bit more of a straight back. And his entire gesture should have been just rotated. This is going to be tricky to do. Okay, because it doesn't feel like he's in control. It feels like he's fallen. Because it just... it just feels like he's like fallen as a stiff, like he just got like this Petrificus Totalis spell just thrown on him. And he just kind of froze in that position, but he also started falling. Like some sort of glitch in Zelda Breath of the Wild. So I want something a little bit more in control, like he's deliberately falling and falling towards his enemy to kill them. The straight back will also help to create the feeling like he's in control and is posing and has a very defined grace to him. A straight head might also help. Okay. The Sound of Music. Yes, there we go. The Sound of Music, not The Hills Have Eyes. Jeez. Alright, so Petrificus Totalis. And then he's a little bit more in control. I'd make him take up the entirety of the scene. I'd make him take up the whole scene, and I'd darken this dude in front of him. He's just a secondary extra. He's not really that important, but he seems to have the same kind of brightness as the character. Yes, he's in front of the character, but it doesn't mean that he gets all that brightness. Okay, so he can be a little bit bigger, a lot more rage in his eyes, and we studied expression. He looks a little bit feminine, and we studied masculine faces. So we've been preparing for this illustration for a long time, and the year is coming to a close. So I want to see that you guys are throwing some, shout outs back to our previous homework and actually looking into what you learned in previous classes. So the gesture, the key frame, choosing the best frame. I don't think you chose the best frame for the attack. And I've told you guys to look at videos to get a better idea of what it is that you're getting out of your gesture. And so it doesn't feel like you did look into much videos, unless I'm saying look into the videos. Don't wait for me to say look at videos for reference. This should be something that you guys do by default, okay? So how many of you looked at videos while you were doing your homework at Sword Dancers or anything similar? That's a good idea. Using the background of an actor to determine who would be a good reference for a character. Absolutely. No, I don't watch 3 YouTube videos at the same time. I completely understand the brief. You completely misunderstood the brief, I see. It's okay. I do leave a lot open for interpretation, so you guys could have easily made a very tanky sword dancer, right? It doesn't always have to be ballet. It doesn't always have to be a lightweight. So you guys did look at videos. Okay. I hope that the ones who did look at videos are the ones that found better results in their paintings. And for those who did look at the videos and didn't get good results, look at more videos. Try to expose yourself as much as possible. Choose a specific dance type. Expose yourself to more, every time you do concept art for a specific field of study or a specific action or activity, learn about it. So if you're designing a swordsman, learn about the different styles of swords. Learn about, that's how you build your knowledge as you get older. Learn about the different styles of fighting. Learn about the Eastern and Western styles. And if you're studying, let's say for our current challenge is pole vaulting. So you're studying pole vaulting, so you're probably going to watch a lot of how-to videos on pole vaulting, and now you're adding to that pool of knowledge. Every assignment is giving you guys a chance to learn about something new. So it doesn't always have to be a still reference you got out of Google. Actually read and listen to these tutorials with the mic on. I mean, with the sound on. You don't have to just observe it only visually. Really get captured in. That might also help you remember some of the features. And if someone's teaching you that the pose for fencing, you have to have this kind of lunge, your feet have to be this far apart, you remember that when you're designing your character and the gesture that's lunging. You're going to draw them with close-up feet, and you're going to correct it right away, saying, no, I remember the teacher saying for a proper squat for or a lunge for a fencing pose, the legs have to be apart a certain degree. This is a great scene. Not reading it as a sword dancer at all. There's no dancing. This scene is extremely dark, even though you have multiple light sources. All light sources are allowed to enter no man's land values, which is pure white. That should have reflected a little bit more on her. I don't read a dancer off of her. The scene is just way too dark. I like the font for the author. I don't like it for the title. The title gets a bit big and starts taking up the focal point, and it's such a dark scene on such a white font title and author title that author font, that it's just they're really countering each other. This here doesn't feel like a dancer. He feels like he's attacking someone in the foreground. This little bell tower here should not be dark. If it's in the background, what happens to objects in the background? They get lighter. They don't get darker. Okay, so it's nice and out of the way. Then you have the glow of this hand. So now we've filled and occupied that space up. And if he's a dancer, yes, this is definitely a dance pose. And he seems to be a lightweight in midair. Is he jumping towards this character here? So that he can sell his soul for the sword? Or is this a magic spell? Is this an exchange of soul and magic? What's happening here exactly? It's hard to tell if he's about to kill this person. His face feels very determined to kill. He also doesn't, he feels very old. So just because of this line right here, which could have been easily avoided if the light was coming from a different angle. He feels old. He feels like an older character, not a character or a novice wizard that has just learned how he can sell his sword so he can, or sell his soul so that he can be stronger. He's wearing kind of a monk hat, so he's making this massive jump. His hood should have just come off, and his hair should be kind of mad. He's about to sell his soul. The arm feels a little dislocated. I feel like the arm would be more towards this direction. And his head is a bit big. There should be more horror on his face, kind of more of an open eye. His eyelids are closed. Is he asleep? If not, then he should have opened his eyes. And he's looking at his soul, I guess, with more of an intensity. Okay, so more openness in the eyes. We've studied expression. We've talked about how horror or shock or madness, which is, I guess, what we're reading here. Madness is requires the white in the eyes to be opened. All right, so a little bit more intensity, a little bit more of an anger. He's kind of ready to, he's determined. He's not even thinking twice about selling his soul. filter. I'm just going to correct the size of the head, which should be a little bit more compressed in the perspective. Okay, so really big class today because it was a pretty big assignment. But a lot of you who are here as my apprentices are learning one big lesson. It's no matter how much you plan, you haven't planned enough. Okay, write that back to me. Plan as much as possible, and if someone's soul is being sold, actually Google that. Google selling soul. Maybe someone conceptualized it in a Disney movie before. Maybe the way Ariel, when she sold her voice to Ursula, her expression was horrified, and she, you know, she kind of completely lost her mind at that moment. And the way Ursula's expression as she was gaining her soul, or her voice, which is essentially her soul, she controlled her. Not yet though, because that was before she actually sold her soul and they became tiny maggots. So that's one way to pick up some inspiration for a scene where a character's selling their soul. Maybe he just finished the dance and he's doing the final blow. He's gonna stab his own soul and get the exchange of power. Something like that. There's a lot of symbolism here. So his sword should have been a little bit longer, because if it's medieval Christian, then the sword should have been a little bit longer. I understand the monk outfit now. Okay. Any questions? Definitely haven't planned enough. If you guys want to get into professional concept art, if you want to perfect your portfolio, planning is the only thing that's going to save you, because you're taking away all the guesswork. So if you're noticing that you're doing guesswork, that should stop. Okay, so here this character with their tiny little shield is more of a performer. This is not a functional shield, and if it is, it's for close combat. So if it's close combat, that means, you know, only the greatest soldiers do close combat, which is like melee, face to face with your monster, so they can rip you right in half. Every time I look at the top part of the body, I'm just in love with it, but I look at the bottom and all I see is ballet. So he looks like a ballet actor, or like a ballet dancer, a professional dancer, playing the role for a ballet play. So the face is a little bit kind of too large and expanding kind of out of the rotation. So when I think sword dancer, I love the way, just this entire stacking here. Love it, love it, love it, love it. But I would probably give him a larger shield. Even if you reference a small shield, I think that larger shield would have shown a bit more of a utility. But even then, it seems like, alright, let me just do what I can do here. It seems like you use the upper body of a warrior and the lower body of a dancer. I should be seeing dancer in the upper body as well. So how could you have done that? And you could have done that with the other arm. You had an entire other arm you just used a silly little shield for. You could have made him kind of mess around with another sword, so there could have been a bit more of a dancer-esque way of holding his other sword. Maybe he was brandishing it, like a cheesy way they brandish swords in Hollywood. But he could have been doing something very similar. And the reason why it's cheesy is because in Hollywood they're supposed to be strong warriors, but they're just there brandishing their swords like it's a play or something. So maybe his dance could have had a sword like that. Maybe he had some kind of decorative banner on the hilt, kind of adding to the gesture. And then we have this foot, which I feel like should be a little less dancey. Alright, so it feels like he's doing a very kind of like a Russian soldier type of like hup, hup, hup. And he kind of just did the aerial version, like the aerial jump move. But he'll go right back to squats and crazy dance moves in a second. I feel like curling your toes is for women. Sorry if that's a little sexist, but it's a very, very feminine dance ballet. And even if there's masculine guys with muscles kind of performing, it's still a very extremely feminine delicate kind of dance style. Yes, it can have a more of a strong, aggressive element to it, but all of its fundamentals and pose and ballet and stretching your limbs as long as possible. Longer limbs are very feminine, and it's a dance of long limbs. So I'm just trying to get a good perspective on the foot here. Okay, another thing you could have done is just completely tilt away. Flatten. Okay. Completely tilt that leg back down just a little bit more so that he's doing less with his body in the form of ballet. Beautiful job on the architecture in the background. I really like it. The framing is a little bit off. I would move the character more this way so he's more in the center. Feels like you threw him off center just for the sake, just because of, you know, being aware not to make him too symmetrical, but he does need to be a little bit more symmetrical. Okay, the title was symmetrical enough. Right, so he was off to the side. It's just, they were just completely different countries. They were just like completely separated elements in the body. You had the upper and lower body as completely separate entities. One was more of a warrior and the other was more straight up ballet. You need to combine the two together for it to make sense. Upper and lower body are part of the same person, right? Okay. So if it was a character who only had a curse to dance on his lower body, then it would explain why his lower body is so different. I want to see all these corrections done, okay, guys? I want to see these pieces in your portfolios. We're not just doing these for fun. I mean, we are doing these to learn. For this gesture, it's great, but the shoulders are very haunched, and that was what I was referring to earlier. There needs to be more of a strong forward arc to the upper body, just to show that the character is a little bit more versed kind of in the dance form. It's not just the first time they clumsily tried it in a dance class. Okay, that their backs are actually straight. Because of how versed they are and how familiar they are with the dance form, the flexibility, the confidence, and knowing how to dance and knowing all the moves. Right, and just because posture is part of the dance and confidence and straight back is part of the athleticism. A healthy body is a body with good posture. If it's a female, I'll give a little bit more of a thinner waist. And I think that helps the image feel a little bit less clumsy, or the pose feel a little bit less clumsy. Okay, but I would still raise the body up a little bit, give more neckline, a little bit more length to the neck. Let me show you. So a bit more length here would have helped a lot. Portray that confidence in the character. I'm just going to give them a quick shortcut because I don't want to hide that neckline. You should have chosen another hairstyle. And if you had to use that hairstyle, there are kind of other ways to reveal the neckline. Okay, so a little bit more confident, less altogether slouched forward. I like the font in this one, to be honest. I like it. It feels like it belongs. It feels more Asian-esque as well. And I, however, think this is just one of the many gestures you could have chosen. There should have been a little bit more of a motion involved. So if you think wushu sword. Let me just, oh, there we go. If you watch the way wushu swordsman, oh, we just saw it. Wushu sword fight. Okay. Okay, so she's gonna start doing that. You see all these really, you see that very strong shoulder line? very high knee, and the knee is kind of close to the chest. Okay, so that's something that you could have chosen from. This could have been the exact gesture you chose. That upward lifted toe, the beautiful C line going into a straight line from the arms, the strong back, the bent knee, and the proud head would have all helped portray that dancer. Okay, well here it feels a little clumsy, like she's just part of a class and defending some enemies. This could have been her and the swords, and it could have been coming from the side, threatening her. So you all did so wonderfully, because it's still a very, very challenging world you were expected to create. And you notice that as you are completing these assignments that come with this being an apprentice, you are expected to design a world each time we design a character design. So it's not just about a good gesture and a good costume, because that's easy when it's just a standing character. That's why I had a standing character design assigned some months ago, to prepare you for the full book cover scene. So what we're going to do for the rest of this, the assignment for this month will be an interior room design. And it'll be just a light study, a study on light. So we'll go back, step away from design, and let your minds rest a little bit with this field, and come back to it when we feel refreshed and when our muscles that we used for this assignment healed and are ready for another challenge very similar. For November or December, I might assign another full character illustration to close off the year, which will be very, very fun. In the new year, we'll start some other stuff, and I think we'll just continue with world design and world building. So interior design, I'm going to talk about the kind of daytime, so it'll be like a 5 o'clock sunset going through the window. The window design has to be reflected on the ground. Really, really basic lighting study to give you guys a break. Thank you everyone for joining, and thank you guys for your support. I can't believe that we've come so far. It's already October, and it's gonna be done soon as well. Thank you all for your patience for this month's rewards. The sale has been really, really crazy, and as a way to thank you guys and apologize for the lack of personal work that I haven't been able to complete, I'm adding an extra promo code for anyone who doesn't own Portrait Studio. You guys are going to have an even bigger amount off. I added on top of the 50%, you have an extra promo code. So thank you everyone for joining. I'll see you guys in our Discord group. Bye.